Hey, welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with the interview series presented by WFPK at WFPK.org, Consequence of Sound, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Thank you so much, as always, for checking out the series, making your way here. Always appreciate it. You know the drill. If you like what you're getting here, hit that subscribe button. We put out 3 interviews every single week. It's a great way to keep up with all of your favorite artists. And I know that includes Mr. Steve Hackett, who I have the pleasure and honor of talking with once again, who has a brand new record called Under the Medetarranian Sky. Hi, Steve. How are you?
Very well. Thank you, Kyle. Nice to talk to you again. How are you doing?
I'm doing great over here, man. Congratulations. I always love everything that you put out. Under the Medetarranian Sky is it's a nice little masterpiece. The mood on this, I can tell you, I think I needed it this year with everything that's going on. Where did this come about, though? I mean, I should ask, like, what attracted you to this theme of the Mediterranean?
Basically, I've traveled to the Mediterranean area so many times, both as an entertainer and as a tourist. And of course, it's a huge region and hugely diverse, with lots of different kinds of music that characterize each country and region. And it was my wife, Jo, who suggested, when the idea of doing an acoustic album came up, an acoustic orchestral album, to try and broaden it as much as possible by using regional sounds and things that were perhaps more typical of each country in order to have a concept with the album. So there'll be some unfamiliar instruments or less familiar instruments, as well as the ones that are usually expected. Of course, most of it centers on nylon guitar, classical guitar, flamenco guitar, which I spend most of my life doing. Although I'm known primarily as a rock guitarist, it takes more time to get acoustic work, I think, up and flying and get it to be convincing. But I think of this album really as an orchestral album. There's an orchestra, there's a virtual orchestra, there's a real orchestra, there are individuals, but then there's a small orchestra called the nylon guitar, the acoustic guitar. When you start to orchestrate with that, even on entirely solo pieces without any accompaniment, you can still orchestrate within that, but you have to use your imagination to say, this is brass, this is bright, playing by the bridge, these are fanfares, this is impersonating the piano, this is impersonating the harp, this is cascading, this is the sense of a fountain, all of those things that you can conjure with the magic box.
Yeah, you talk about that. Like, I was already going to ask, like, if you know, when you make that determination that you're only going to stick with one type of guitar, with a nylon guitar, if that added certain parameters, but it almost sounds like it doesn't add as many parameters as I might have thought that it would.
Well, there are other instruments as well. You know, there are other stringed instruments. There's the Arabian oud, there's the Peruvian charango, there's the tar. The guy from Azerbaijan plays that, Malik Mansurov, who's appeared on quite a lot of my albums. There's some real oboe, some real violin, real viola, other things, real flutes, real bits of brass, soprano sax from Rob Townsend. So I don't think of it as, I never think of anything as a solo album. It's the sum of all the things that go with it. But I held off on rock guitar, although there is some rock guitar invisibly, but it wasn't plugged in. I wanted to use it as an acoustic instrument and hit it hard so that we had that sort of sound of a flamenco thing without. So it was still an acoustic instrument, but you know, it's an electric guitar, but not plugged in. How's that for restraint from a rock guitarist?
Not even plugged in.
Not even plugged in.
Not even. It's not a region that is typically explored in Western music. I mean, I do think we hear it in film scores and things like that, but as far as, you know, what we would get when you're putting it together, do you try to make a bridge to, you know, to what we know over here, to what's typical, or do you really just fall down that rabbit hole and allow yourself to go all the way there and for the listener to catch up with you?
Well, I don't think there's any concession to what I think of as American influence on it. It's basically either European or Mediterranean, Arabian, Turkish even. That doesn't mean to say that I don't subscribe and love American music. I did one blues album in my life. The electric guitar obviously hails from those shores. I was playing harmonica years before I was playing guitar. And then when I was a little bit older, shall we say, I got to spend some time with Larry Adler. I watched the late, great Paul Butterfield playing harmonica in 1966 with an incredible band of guys, some of whom were working with Bob Dylan at the time. And this is, early days of Dylan going electric with Mike Bloomfield in the band. Still his favorite guitarist of all time, apparently, in terms of cohorts. Mr. Butterfield passed, Mr. Bloomfield passed, but it was still an incredible experience. So I think I come to guitar playing originally from the sensibility of being a harmonica player, which might sound very, very strange, but at times electric guitar can sound just like a harmonica and vice versa. They can both be very close to the sound of the human voice. Nylon guitar, less so. But I think at times, if I'm trying to emulate anything, it'll be the unlimited access of wider harmonies that you get with the piano, the keyboard, all of those things. So I've been trying to knock down the walls of the difference between the two all these years. But I understand it makes very little concession to the modern world. It's a very organic album. It practically wrote itself. I recorded it in 2 months. It was the first of 2 studio albums I intend to release this year. I'm working on a rock album too. So if this one is not for you, the next one, I'm about 45 minutes into that. I keep it coming. So there's been a live album, there's been an autobiography. Mm-hmm. There's this acoustic album just about to come out in a number of days. Then there's a rock album, and then by then I should have been vaccinated, and I should be living out of a suitcase again, with any luck, coming to your shores and playing. I'm looking forward to that. I get frustrated, but it's been a very creative time for me. Very good as a writer, as a player, as a singer, all sorts of things. And I haven't seen it as a limited time. Mm-hmm. The fact that we can't travel is one thing, but it doesn't mean that travels of the imagination shouldn't be explored. So this, Under a Mediterranean Sky, it's a virtual journey to an area that was once the center of the world. That's why the term Mediterranean. For the ancients, that was it.
Yeah, it seems like every time we talk, there tends to be this type of conversation too, when we're talking about the world. I mean, you do travel a lot, obviously, as a touring musician. Yeah. We watch, the photos that go up online on your social accounts, and there's a lot of vacation pictures that I think end up on there as well. I know that's part of it. And for a lot of your music, it does seem like there ends up being, maybe just in a natural way, because you're absorbing it, a sociological tie-in. And, and as I was reading, I even think of the press release or something may have mentioned this too, but, some of the countries that you are hitting on here on this record, they're at war with each other.
Yes.
And
that's right.
Yeah. How is that reflected in the music? How all of this comes together, do you find?
I've probably said this before, but I find that, when politicians are driving us apart, and we are, currently faced with the house divided, none more so than in your country at the moment, and what would Brexit over here, music does something else. It bridges generations, cultures, many things, certainly genres of music, which I've been trying to do ever since I turned professional, which is now 50 years ago. I joined Genesis 50 years ago, a mere 50 years ago. This year, I joined in 71. It's now 2021. But I'm still trying to do the same thing. Hopefully, it's to heal the great rift that divides us in this strange world. I mean, there are two people who literally, were their nations were at war, who were on one of these tracks. One guy from Armenia and another guy from Azerbaijan were on the record. Duduk from Armenia, the Tar from Azerbaijan. They were at war in it's the Nagorno-Karabakh region. Things seem to have calmed down, but you know, these divisions run deep, and they've gone back for generations. But somehow art does something that politics won't do. We're not looking for division. I'm looking for similarities. I'm looking for bridges. I'm trying my damnedest to make music an ambassador for peace. If people can play together, as we had on a previous album with one Palestinian and one Israeli, and funny enough, Mira, who's the Palestinian, sent me something recently, this very day, that I was listening to her incredible voice on something. It's interesting, isn't it? At the end of the day, you know, we're still in the trenches, aren't we? We thought the First World War was the war to end all wars, but trench mentality seems to be there the whole time. What is it? I'm ashamed of the fact that when I was at school, I would get into fights and scraps, and I look back with great shame, and yet I see adults doing the same thing. You know, people have got roofs over their houses, food on the table. What is it about the need to go to war? Luckily, aggression can be channeled into instruments and music. Nobody dies when somebody lets off a salvo of notes on an electric guitar. Tappers unite. We can do that. We can, you know, we can have bazookas. We can have bazookies. Music can do all of this and still remain constructive. Nobody dies. It's fine.
Yeah, that's perfectly said. I've always appreciated your message on all of that, and I do love how it works. And I think that, you know, it does go into a broader topic of what we're getting at here too, because, you know, obviously we have our own issues over here in America. My TV is on the far end of the room right now, and it's not stopping. On your side of things, I think there was recently something with the visa-free tours that's really going to be affecting. Yes. Once this all does start up again, it's still not going to be the way it needs to be, correct?
That's right. Yes. Well, you know, funny enough, I wrote an autobiography recently, and I was talking about, you know, how difficult it was to tour at one time with the air of suspicion. People were suspicious of musicians. I was, you know, accustomed several times having to take my clothes off and explain what I was doing and why you're here and where are the drugs, and aren't you, you know, you're an insurrectionist, you know, long hair is persona non grata, all that kind of stuff. And suddenly we seem to be back there again, the air of suspicion. But, you know, with Brexit, of course, it's a crazy idea, really, because we need supply lines from Europe. We need it for our security. But people just seem to have bought into the idea of an idea that's basically xenophobic. It's fear of the foreigner, fear of the people who are 20 miles away over the channel, the French. Crazy. People never really seem to grow up. So yes, it's going to be very difficult, visa restrictions and withholding taxes and in all these separate nations, whereas at one time we would just sail through. We got rid of the borders. Now we're going back to them. So the fight isn't over yet.
Yeah, no, I know you know, I know that's easier. I think it's going to be easier for musicians like yourself that have history, that, you know, aren't living that, you know, show to show wise, but to be a younger artist in Europe and trying to navigate this, it's yeah, I can't even imagine.
It's really the death of international music. You know, a young band like Genesis, you know, starting out with a little tiny van, touring. I'm not sure that the margins of profit are going to be there when just to get the insurances, the visas, etc., are going to be prohibitive. So our British government has been no friend whatsoever to the arts. So I'm not very happy with them, and I think they've handled the pandemic appallingly badly. And I really hope that they get voted out at the next election. And I hope that we've got, some people who are going to be more efficient. Hey, it's time for a change. That's what the world's going through. People have to move over and try it another way. Perhaps the demon isn't around the corner. The demon, hey, we're suddenly all going to be communists. We've got to defend our right to hamburgers and all the rest. There's so much bull going down, seems to me. Yeah. Hey, maybe it won't be so bad. I remember Lennon saying stuff like that. Maybe the revolution, maybe it won't be so bad. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But meanwhile, yes, I'm glued to the box watching what's going on in your country. Less so with what's going on in my country because I get bored with the same old rubbish. But I watch Al Jazeera, which I know you have over there, and that's very interesting. It's world news and championing the underdog. And you get to see what's going on. People that are, one half of the world in a kind of prison camp, living under tents, and the rest of us from the privileged world who don't know how lucky we are. And I'm not making this up, but is that what we really want? Do we want, do we want to extend Guantanamo Bay over the globe? Hopefully not.
Right. Well, I know it seemed like we were hand in hand on electing the wrong people a few years ago. And while we have ways to go from making a full turn over in America, we at least got back on the right foot. And hopefully that's not far from you all either, getting back on the right foot. So
I don't know. There seems to be a tremendous amount of apathy when you talk to the Brits. I'm not sure they're going to make the right change next time. I think there's the lemming mentality following our leaders, our glorious leaders, over the cliff and into the sea, and whoa, we're going to drown. What a shame. I think in my younger day, I was more politically apathetic. But perhaps it's part of the process of growing up and not being so young anymore that enables me to see the mistakes before they happen. It's interesting that, sometimes it's not enough to be right. It's also about timing. Sometimes you have to make yourself unpopular to be popular. I always found that within rock groups. Sometimes you had to say something that was unpopular in order for the band to move forward and grasp a truth that was way beyond everyone's separate interests. But for the sake of the band, you need to do this. For the sake of the country, you need to do this. Microcosm, macrocosm. Far cry from talking about music. What are you listening to at the moment?
I'll bring it back around to this again. This beautiful record with Under the Mediterranean Sky. But what we're talking about here, eventually there will be a tour. You will be back on the road, and you've talked about some of those plans. How do you plan on incorporating this record into what you're doing? Because as I've seen in your past tours, you do try to make them a bit thematic. Do you find that this is fitting in with what you're working on?
Well, increasingly live, what I've done is to divide my shows into two halves. And the first half tends to be solo stuff, which means I can play anything. But the last tour I did, I concentrated on Spectral Mornings, which was from the year 1979, if I remember correctly. And then I was trying to choose a favorite Genesis album to play in its entirety, one that John Lennon picked up on when we were all 23 years old, very, very young. And so Selling England by the Pound was the go-to album, I think. And so I thought to do a blockbuster show, I would do both of these albums, certainly most of Spectral and Selling England in its entirety, plus one deleted scene that was started way back in the day, and to do a finished version of it today, a track that I ended up finishing with Peter Gabriel many, many years later, long after we both left Genesis. But the idea started when we were in the band together. There's also some stuff from the current album, which did much better in the charts than anything I've done for years. Got in the charts in 13 different territories. So, fans wanted new stuff. Promoters wanted old stuff. There's a compromise, meet in the middle, give people old favorites, and also stuff that goes beyond keeping the museum doors open for old favorites and doing other stuff. having said that, I do love the early work with Genesis, and I was intending, before everything got rescheduled, to do the whole of Seconds Out.
Mm-hmm.
So from beginning to end, plus to do full-length versions of those tunes, because I know it's many people's go-to album for the 70s Genesis stuff. So that album was cherry picking across lots of the best of and most iconic work that we'd done up to then. So it was a live album, and I will be doing it live. Once the world is open for business, I'll be open for business as well, and I'll be taking that. And we tend to do a 3-hour show. I will fit in some solo stuff as well, but I think that's going to be an exciting show. And personally, I'm really looking forward to all those things that we've been denied for the past year.
Yeah. I was excited to hear about Seconds Out, of course, as any Genesis fan would be. As I was looking back and doing some reading on that record, there was a famous line, because of that was when you left, that was the record that you were sort of mixed out of. And I thought, well, this, it's not that you haven't played these songs before, but I guess this really does give you the opportunity to mix you right back into that.
Indeed. Yeah, it gives me the chance to shake them up a bit and give them a workout, I think. There are things that I would do now that I wouldn't have done then. There might be some extra parts. I know that I've certainly played Supper's Ready from beginning to end in recent years. Every now and again, I bring that one out of the hat and do it, but it tends to get extended. It's kind of the definitive Genesis tune of the progressive era of the band. And funnily enough, I was talking to a Japanese interviewer today, first thing in the morning, right the other end of the time, because it's nearly 8 o'clock in the evening here in London. But 9 o'clock this morning, they're always working. And she was saying something very interesting. She said, progressive rock is radical music. She thought it was more radical than punk, which she felt, had a narrower focus, perhaps, and a more rootsy approach. Whereas progressive rock, if I could defend the ethos of inclusive music, which is allowed to eclectically take things from jazz, from classical music, from anything you like, as far as I'm concerned. Blues is welcome. George Gershwin meets George Harrison meets Chuck Berry meets anything. I love the idea of just mixing it all up. Why not have Indian music? Why not have world music? Why not do what the 60s allowed us to do, which was the way to say, yeah, well, everywhere is mainstream once you start using it. There's no such thing as a useless instrument. The Brazilian berimbau, literally a bow and arrow that's being used in a musical context. You think that it wouldn't have a place in rock, but it does. Percussion instruments, rain sticks, all this stuff. Yes, doesn't that belong in the jungle? No, it belongs downtown. That's where we need it, because every instrument, no matter how humble, even if it's the triangle, has its place in the big canvas that is music. Anyway, the imagination is unlimited. Formatting, I think, is the death of experiment and surprise. So I'm trying my damnedest to tear up the rule book every time I make an album and invite people from all over the world to take part in it, and perhaps have a core band, a house band, but then find out, well, how would a drummer from Iceland treat it, or how would an American drummer do it? What about Azerbaijan, Armenia, India? Shima Mukherjee, that incredible virtuoso who was on our last record. Wonderful to have real sitar, after I've been trying to impersonate it with sitar guitars and samples for years. How wonderful to have the real thing. So Isn't that wonderful? The adventure continues, and I'm still as crazy about music as I always was.
Yeah, well, we certainly benefit from that. I appreciate everything you do with that. And again, Under the Mediterranean Sky, that's the new record, is another testament to it. And hearing that we're going to get a rock record later this year, is that what you said? Yeah, so
that's right. Yeah, later in the year, probably out in the autumn. So when I talk about these things, I tend not to talk about one project. I'm always getting excited about the next thing. I mean, I love Under a Mediterranean Sky. I really do. I think it's the best produced of all the acoustic things I've done. But I think also the rock record, that's work in progress. So I'm sticking TNT underneath that to make that explode, and it's taking a very exciting direction. We have people from all over the world on it already, and that will hopefully increase. Even though I won't be working with them face to face quite so much, because that's just the nature of the way things are at the moment here. Nonetheless, I'm at the point where I have to go and do yet another thing, and pick up the phone again and sell myself again.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. Hopefully we can talk once again when the new rock record comes out.
Thank you.
Steve, thank you so much again for taking the time to talk. Congratulations on this, and we'll see you around.
Lovely talking again. Thank you so much, Kyle. All the best to you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.